All right, thank you very much, everybody. My name is Richard Arroyo, and I'm the president of the Board of Ed in Berlin, and we're about to start our meeting for tonight on April 27th. So welcome, everybody. I think we have everyone here, although we did invite our 2 student reps, and they're not present yet. Hopefully they'll be able to make it. Other than that, looking quickly around the board, it looks like everybody else, all the other members of the board are here tonight. That's great. Before we get started with our meeting tonight, I just want to recognize Berlin has been hit hard in the last 2 weeks, especially with the COVID. I think we now have close to 100 people in town that have been diagnosed and suffering, certainly more that were not diagnosed but are still suffering. And I want to take a moment to recognize those people and those families that are suffering during this time, as well as the unfortunate few that have passed away. So if we could just do a moment of silence before we have our Pledge of Allegiance tonight, please. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. We're going to continue to work together to bring Berlin through this. We've got a lot to cover tonight. We're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could put the flag up, please. And since we don't have any of our student reps in here, I guess I'll have to lead us myself. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, sure, you all stay muted, so all the pressure was on me to get the words right on that one. Usually I can hide in the background. All right, thank you. So we'll call the meeting to order. And we're going to start off tonight with our committee reports and correspondence to the board. So we don't have our student representatives today, but so if they do show up a little late, we'll get them on quickly. We'll start off with the committee reports, and I know we have a heavy-duty one from the F&O, from Finance and Operations. Matt, do you want to take it from here?
Thanks, Rich. This is Matt Tenza. I'm the chairperson for the F&O committee. We did have an F&O meeting last week where we covered 7 different agenda items. The meeting lasted about 2 hours, 10 minutes long, and I'm going to summarize it in significantly less time. So with that said, the first thing that we reviewed was the final budget reductions to reach the 3.2% budget that we have been approved for by the town. Brian provided some information, and I know that later we're going to talk about, or at least you have in your packets, the final 2020-2021 budget executive summary. But in essence, the modifications Brian made does allow us to do a couple of key things. First is we're going to be able to keep some of those key positions in place that Brian requested, that being the teacher leader at the middle school, the tech integration specialist, the tech coordinator. Brian, what am I missing? I know that there's at least one more.
Spanish teacher at the high school.
Spanish teacher at the high school. Those will remain in our operating budget. And in order to make that happen, there were some items that were pushed over to the choice grant, and other reductions were made along the way. After lengthy discussion, I can tell you that the F&O committee is very comfortable with where Brian and Jeff have, made the reductions. And while there's no action taken, I think it's good for the entire board to know that they've been reviewed and essentially the committee is in agreement with them. The second thing that we talked about, well, in no particular order, it just happens to be that I wrote it down, is the transportation savings that we thought we were going to have because school is out has changed significantly due to the governor's executive order that school districts are to negotiate with the bus companies and make some payments. Negotiations are going on right now at present time. But when we originally thought that we may have upwards of $600,000 or $700,000 in savings, that has significantly been lowered. And Jeff and his team are negotiating with New Britain Transportation to come up with a number. Hopefully we'll have that resolved by the next time we meet. But right now, the executive order asks that school districts negotiate They pay salaries and benefits and cover some of the fixed costs for the bus companies. And as I said, negotiations are underway. More to come on that one. One of our big, we spent an awful lot of time on what we thought the year-end surplus was going to be based on the school closing and also the management of this year's budget. As we, as an entire board, have talked earlier, we felt it's important that based on the current crisis, that we do our best to not only take care of the school district, but if we can return funds to the town of any significant amount, we should be doing that. That's the responsible community thing to do. So with that said, as of, I'm going to use the term today because this is such a fluid situation, it looks like we're going to have somewhere around $544,000 left over at the end of this year. So roughly a little over $500,000. And I tell you, don't go to the bank with that because it is fluid. Every day something changes, and we need to be prepared for that. So with that in mind, we are trying to come up with what is the right ratio to return back to the town. What should we be keeping in contingency for unexpected costs as this closing and moves forward? And I say it that way because we don't know what's going to happen with the summer. We don't know what we may or may not have to do. So it's just this gray area. And at some point, I'm assuming that we're going to have some discussion about this later on in the in this meeting. But just keep in mind that the number is a little bit right now. Today is a little over $500,000. Facility study. We talked about, we talked about and approved to have the facility study done. I may take a little bit of Jeff's thunder here, but we are happy to announce that the facility study is underway and we have an expected completion date in August later this year. And that will really give us an opportunity to look at kind of long-term planning as it relates to our buildings and what we need to do with them going forward so that we can make responsible and logical requests relative to the capital budget and future modifications to our buildings. And then lastly, we talked about the hockey situation for athletics. We had a pretty lengthy discussion about this and feel that, we do need to do something for these students. We have a preliminary outline here, but we're seeking a little bit more information before the F&O committee makes its final recommendation to the rest of the board. So with that, I think I kept it under 10 minutes, Rich, so take it away.
Thank you. Kind of an update a little bit right now is Tim has just reported that we were wondering where our two student representatives were, but their student Chromebooks are not allowing them into Google Hangouts. So we're working on that right now. And I appreciate, Tim, that you're facilitating that information. Hopefully they can get themselves in at some point and be heard, because I really would like to. Before we go on to, and I don't believe, actually, Julia, was there any communications or committee meeting this week? No?
Hi, no, there was no new communication, no new committee meeting.
Sorry about that. I also knew that we haven't met with the curriculum committee, has not met in the last couple of weeks, so I knew we didn't have anything there. Before we get further into whether correct and the correspondence to the board, I was neglecting to thank the administrators for coming on tonight. I really do appreciate your time. I know that things have been quite busy over the last several weeks, and we have three different people who've sent in questions to the audience of citizens, and all three of them kind of deal with different levels of education, including some at the elementary level. So I'm really glad that you're all here and you can give us a little bit of insight into how well this is working and maybe even help to answer some of those questions as well. I also want to thank the staff And the kids themselves, this is quite an undertaking and things are shifting. And I know we're going to hear later on from Aaron that we're shifting our certain practices and policies, and Brian is going to reflect on that as well. So those shifts all take a lot of work beforehand, a lot of preparation that we're required. Going forward right now, the CREC report. Tracy, is your microphone able to work now?
I'm on.
Was there anything through CREC?
Yes. Well, we
great.
had a meeting, I think it was last Thursday, about a week and a half or so ago. And basically they talked about how the districts have came together to support the students. More districts are supplying lunches and breakfast for the students. They're still working. There are children that do not have devices, and they're still working on getting devices to students, as well as a lot of towns have utilized buses as hotspots. So they park them in neighborhoods that don't have internet access. And so they've been able to work off of the buses for hotspots, which I thought was a great idea. And they talked about how Zoom meetings, how they're having some issues with people invading Zoom meetings, and some things that were happening on that were not very good. People kind of crashing the meeting, so to say. So they worked on security measures to amp that up so that didn't happen. And basically talked about how the legislation's kind of asleep, and some of the things that they were bringing to legislation, they're kind of putting it on hold at this point, probably till next year, just because of everything that's happening. And that was about it.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I appreciate that. I was unaware that you guys had a meeting, so that's really good information. I especially like the bus idea. That's very creative problem solving. I like that. Ryan, you made it. We passed over student representatives, but we're going to back up a little bit for you. I'm really glad to see you. The irony, of course, is that you had talked to me a little while ago about certain things being blocked on Chromebooks, and there you go. And we were blocked on Chromebook for you. So I'm really glad you're able to figure this out and join us. Do you have anything specific from your end?
For me, the online learning and like all of that stuff has been going really good. And I personally like it just because I feel like I have more freedom to do the work when I want and complete it how I want. And all the Zoom meetings that are going on are really successful for me, and I'm having, productive discussions with teachers and classmates. So for me, it's going really well.
I'm really glad to hear that. What's been the biggest struggle, the biggest challenge, Ryan, so far?
For me, I feel like it's just not being able to see people in person, because it's just like a whole different dynamic when you can talk face to face with people, and whether it's class discussions or just talking to a teacher or something. So for me, that's been challenging.
I appreciate your insight. I'm really glad that you came on here tonight. And Ryan, as we talk about some of these issues, again, I hope you feel free to express your opinions on things as we go through this, because I know there's been a lot of changes that are taking place starting today, actually, whether it's scheduling or grading, et cetera, et cetera. So we may come back to you, and if you have anything you want to add, please feel free to.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Next up on the list, correspondence to the board, Mr. Benigni.
We have no correspondence to the board this time.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to move into audience of citizens, and we actually have 3 people that have sent things in to us. Brian, I did not share the last one with you, but you'll see that it's going to connect directly with what it came in very late, and it's going to connect to what we're talking about anyway. It's a graduation question. So we'll start with Eric Westman, and I apologize, I don't have addresses in front of me for these people. But Eric Westman asked some questions which may pertain to the elementary and the middle school people as well here. He's curious about the transitional programs that exist. I believe he has triplets actually in 5th grade. He'll be moving to McGee next year, and wanting to know that since a lot of the McGee orientation, if you will, has been canceled or bumped away, will there be opportunities for the 5th graders, incoming 6th graders, to tour the building, to have these kind of experiences? And I know that certainly elementary parents are probably thinking exactly the same thing, as well as 9th graders for next year as well.
So I know that Mr. Urso is here. We had some discussion about the transition years, 5th to 6th and 8th to 9th. The concern is that we used to have a getting to know you in June, which would not take place unless we're back in school. I know that Mr. Urso opens up the building to allow students to tour. There's a possibility of putting something into place prior to the start, going 5th to 6th, the start of school. At the high school level, I know Eileen is here. We worked a little bit more last year to build a transition program, and I would imagine we could do something similar prior to the start of school in the summer. Once the buildings are cleaned and we're able to safely have people enter the buildings, and we could do some type of tour or even orientation. I don't know, Sal or Eileen, if you want to comment.
Yeah, so Brian, this is Sal Urso, principal at McGee Middle School. Can everybody hear me? I'm in? Yeah. Okay. Just this morning, I met with our school counselors to try to actually discuss this very topic. And they're looking at some ways to possibly do a virtual tour, possibly talk to students or create videos. We have a couple of videos that we've created in the past, sort of a day in the life of a middle school student that we could push out. But we just started talking about it today. So I think we'll have some pretty good ideas. But Brian, those ideas that you say in terms of if the restrictions lift to allow people in small groups with social distancing, however that is throughout the year or the summer, we can also do that. But we are working and have started talking about our transition for our 5th graders up to 6th grade.
Thanks, Sal. Eileen, if you want to comment on the high school?
Yes, I actually, Barb Ventura and Kelly Mayo and we were actually just starting to have some discussion late last week about some of these things, and provided that we'll be set to go in August, we talked about having additional opportunities for students to come into the building in addition to what we already do in August. We also discussed breaking the incoming class down into various teams, splitting up the 3 administrators, pairing up with counselors, and actually doing some small group Zoom meetings if necessary as a way to talk to students, answer questions, tell them a little bit more about the high school. And we would also want to include some of our student ambassadors from the high school as well, upbeat students, as well as class officers. So we're in some of the beginning conversations as well, but we did start having some of those discussions at the end of the week.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you very much. How about at the elementary level? Brian, maybe, I don't know whether they can speak to it or you can. What's the normal procedures for incoming kindergartners, for example?
I'm going to ask Al to speak to that.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
The question about the knowing procedure, you're saying what we're changing now, what we normally would do under regular circumstances?
Well, wondering how or I guess a little bit of both. I'm not that familiar with what an incoming kindergartner, it's been quite a while since my kids have been that young. So what would the procedure normally be? And then what thoughts and what conversations are happening about changes?
Sure. So I can give you the reference point. Normally, with that information from us and from central office, all the prospective kindergarten students are communicated to directly through mailings and through the information provided. Then we have a K orientation for all of the families where they're contacted. Again, they have an opportunity to come into the schools, meet the teachers, learn about the programs. It's a real nice initial event for families to come in. That's usually adults only. Subsequent to that, we set up K welcome times, which is small groups of families and students. We'll set up times where they'll come into the school. Families will get to meet with all the administrators while the students go with some of the teachers and see the classrooms. They do some activities. It gives us some initial indications about our students and families. We get medical information, allergy information, logistics. It's kind of like a triage center where we kind of double check everything with parents, and they have an opportunity to sit and speak with us, as well as the children to get an opportunity to see some of who their classmates will be and learn about the school a little bit. Then from there, we go through, and then we'll have our normal first day of school and things of that nature. So that's kind of the normal course of events that happens. We do have families that come in and register late, or that may show up to the welcome without getting an assigned time, and so we do have some variation in the numbers that can happen. I know with the distance learning format, General Brian Aaron's central office and Amy have been doing a great job with keeping tabs on the prospective K families and getting their pretty much vital information that we need for registration. And right now it's around the medical pieces and medical information that families are getting and how they're going to drop that off. Because we do have a time frame for those families, and we're not, technically starting until September. We're basically holding on that component and have all the information pretty much right up to speed. We certainly have had some initial discussions around, the opportunity, depending on what happens in the summer, what we can do as far as a welcome or opportunities before school starts. There's some creative measures that you can take at the beginning of a school year, but certainly I don't want to, overstep or say that those are pieces that, we could do. You could always look into staggered starts and, when K starts versus when a school day starts to give them an opportunity to see the different schools and meet families. So there are some variations you can have, but everything is so uncertain. I don't think any of that has been confirmed, but plans as far as how that might look, there's definitely been some initial discussion on that. Hopefully that was helpful.
That was very helpful. I appreciate all that information, because I know while we obviously think about the physical and medical stressors that are out there and employment issues, et cetera, I think sometimes you forget these are stressful times anyway for incoming kids in transitionary grades. And then to not be able to be in touch with people and to not know what's coming next. I think it's comforting to know that at least conversations are taking place and that we're taking a look at all of the activities that we would normally have had and finding out other ways to make them happen. So I'm sure we'll get more information out in the future as we hit all these little milestones and decide when we're going to return.
The K teachers are usually great with making connections with kids, and I'm sure they'd be willing to look at some different ways, given depending on how we open next year, how to make some connections with students that could be coming to school as well.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else on that topic? All right, well then we're going to move into the next letter that came in, and this one came in very late today, and it deals with graduation. I'm going to read you what she said. Her name is Kathy Albert, and I'm going to read her email, and then I think she'll see, or you'll all see, that we're going to answer some of these issues a little bit later anyway, but I do want to put it in the record. It says, I understand you don't have any definitive answers that you can give us right now, but as a parent of a senior student, it would be extremely helpful and greatly appreciated to have some insight as to what your plans or backup plans are going forward for the senior events that normally take place during the last couple of weeks of school, and of course, the graduation ceremony. As a suggestion, I think if the graduation were held at Sage Park, we'd be able to space out the seating for graduates, and as their names are called, the person handing out the diplomas could be wearing a mask and gloves and making sure there's no exposure. As for the guests, they could limit those to immediate family only. These seniors have enough anxiety and sadness over the fear of the unknown. They have worked very hard and have dreamt of this day and deserve the recognition. With that being said, I'm aware that you have to follow guidelines that have been put forth by the state, but it would be conducive to everyone to know that there's a backup plan in place and what the backup plan might look like. In closing, I understand this is difficult for everybody, and I know my family is one of many families that are feeling overwhelmed with the stress that of the unknown in their last days at BHS. I hope these are questions you'll be able to answer. Thank you very much. I know that graduation is a topic we're going to be talking about later. Brian, I don't know if you want to say anything now, or Eileen, about any of the end of the year events specifically. I know graduation's on the agenda.
Eileen and I have had conversations about the events, and I know that Eileen has been looking at each event as it gets closer, making decisions. And Eileen, I'm going to let you comment a little bit about how you've made those decisions and those that you've spoken to regarding the events as well as graduation.
Eileen Eustace, Berlin High School principal. So in some of the conversations that I've had with students and talking about the various that they obviously want to preserve the most is prom as well as graduation. I have to say I admire their very mature attitudes and disposition about all of this, really knowing that there are so many unknowns, and that unfortunately for us, that, some of the decisions may be a little bit out of our hands depending upon the restrictions that are in place. So we have talked about some alternate plans, and I don't know if you want to discuss it now or if you want to wait until we have that discussion further in the agenda. But we are looking for some guidance from the board as well, so that we know which direction we should be heading in as well. Thank you. I guess it's comforting to know that you're having the conversations again about the end of the year activities,
kids are having an opportunity to express their opinions, and the administrators and teachers and staff will sit down and have conversations about what we can do. We are being held hostage right now by the health situation. There's certain things we just can't do, so we have to wait.
So one of the things that I'm putting out to senior students this week is a Google survey for any student that's interested in partaking in a focus group, and then setting up some meetings with some senior focus groups just to discuss things further. I was waiting until after we had this meeting tonight just to know if we have a little bit of a direction to head in, which would be really helpful.
I think obviously you have to have those conversations. I know that when we get to the graduation piece, we'll talk more specifically about that particular ceremony and where some of the ideas are lying at the moment. But as Matt said about the finances, everything is fluid right now. We're still only closed through May 20th. We have to wait and see from the governor's office whether they're going to extend that. I think we all assume that there's more coming, but we really don't know. So it's hard to plan specifics when we don't really know exactly what's happening.
Hey, Rich, if you don't mind, this is Matt Tenza, Board of Education. In listening to the governor's press conference this afternoon, one of the questions posed by the press was specifically around high school graduations. There is a movement out there in some towns for parents to put together volunteer graduation groups. And what they're requesting of the governor's office is that he relax the large group restrictions for a 5-hour period to allow for some type of a graduation ceremony for seniors. He had not been contacted by anybody yet, but he said that it was something that he would think about and consider. But that was as of today at 4:30.
Thank you very much. I've seen the letter that the parent group drafted and sent to the governor's office. Perhaps he hadn't seen it yet. I saw it this afternoon because I think a few of our parents that are involved in my other life in my other town in Southington are involved in that group. So I've seen the conditions that they laid out. It's exactly what you said, but it's a very detailed and very specific letter over the conditions that they would like to see. But we have to right now, as I say, wait for the health experts to let us know what can or can't be done. Thank you, Matt. I hadn't seen the governor's address today, so I'm glad you saw it and comments about it. Are we ready to move to the next person? Brian, do you have any other issues from the first two questions?
I think we covered it.
All right. The third one is actually two questions. Our parent is Imelda Mangelo. And the first one is a little different. We talked a little bit about funding, but we'll start with this. How is the Board of Education being proactive in ensuring enough funds are set aside to replace all of the potential wear and tear, replacing that may need to happen with so many devices now in homes being used for distance learning? While I understand that this is a necessity, I would not want to see our school system affected when we return to the classroom. Berlin Schools has done a great job ensuring that we are up to date with our digital age. I would hate to see it go backwards. And this is directly related to the one-on-one technology, Brian, that has actually helped us achieve some of the successes that we've been able to do so far this year. So maybe you want to address her question.
I think that that was brought up by the Finance and Operations Committee.
Yep.
Looking at the number of funds that are saved because of the closure here, as well as additional end-of-the-year monies, which typically have gone towards technology. And that is a priority. Mr. Cugno spoke about it with the group, and Mr. Tenza just said earlier that, the possibility if you don't have the funding within the budget to look the choice to fund to maintain the technology. We currently have over 2,000 devices distributed to students. That includes across the district. So we're looking at more than 2/3 of the population, of student population has a device that's owned by the Berlin Public Schools. We recognize that those devices may not come back in the same condition that they were loaned, and also depending on how long that this whether it's through the rest of the year or not. That being the case, we need to have some contingency funding to replace. We've not allocated funds to replace every item. We usually typically replace Chromebooks in 9th grade. The middle school, we order some replacements, but we don't do a whole grade level because those typically stay in-house. At the elementary level, we look at the iPads, we look at end of life, that's when they're replaced. So we need to have some funding there. I think that we've had the discussion, and I think we'll be okay.
So Brian, let me ask a follow-up on that. If we assume that, let's pretend for the assumption's sake that we're out until the end of this year, we're going to have to find some way to get our devices back, the ones that normally have stayed in school, obviously. So because we're not going to get them back until the summer potentially, we would then not know the condition of these, especially the middle school or the elementary kids that have them. We're not going to know the condition. So is it fair to say that we might not even know until middle or late summer exactly what expenditures are going to come out of this?
That's more than fair to say. Yes.
All right.
And that's why the contingency that we talked about at the Finance and Operations Committee, putting funds in the 2% account that may be used for technology if needed when the time comes, because that account allows us to spend those funds after July 1st.
Thank you.
Rich,
all right. Yep.
Rich,
Go ahead, Matt.
This is Matt Tenza again. That's why when I talked about the end of the year surplus balance, that I said that we needed to break it out into different branches because we simply don't know at this point in time what we're going to need for contingency, because we don't know how long this is going to go on for. And while the board, again, is very much in favor of returning funds to the town, we also have to make sure that we have set enough aside to account for anything that would come up as unexpected. So that would be the use of the 2% account. And as you know, we do have the intention to talk with both the Board of Finance and the Town Council about that.
Thank you very much. And that speaks directly to Imelda's question, so I appreciate that. She has one other question on here. Our students may need additional instruction at the beginning of the fall semester in order to catch up on potential learning gaps given the distance learning model we're in. Are there plans or discussions happening that will determine how this will happen, especially for those that are in grades moving up to the next level, 5th to 6th or 8th to 9th grade?
I'm going to start the discussion, but we did speak and recognize that in the distance learning format, there may be gaps in learning and the learning that would take place as students were in school during this time. That being said, we recognize that there may be some review or the curriculum may need to shift a little initially at the beginning of the year at almost all grade levels because the depth and breadth of the material that's covered may not be the same with distance learning format. Aaron, I don't know if you want to ask our Assistant Superintendent Aaron to comment further on it.
Hi, this is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent of Schools. I hear exactly what you're saying about the concerns relative to the beginning of the start of the school year. I also think that it's critically important for us as district leaders to be cautious about the tone and the energy that we're setting at the beginning of the year. The last thing that we want when kids come back is for them to enter a highly pressured, highly stressful environment. It's going to be important for them to rebuild connections with the community and to regain a sense of getting back into the classrooms and in the routines without overly stressing the issues around trying to catch up or accelerate their learning. So we will have a thoughtful plan for that and a balanced approach that acknowledges the ideas around understanding where the kids are coming in and moving them forward from where they are.
Thank you very much. So balancing the academic and the social and emotional needs of the kids as well. Excellent. Brian, anything else that you'd like to add to the answer, or do we want to move on?
No, I think we've covered it. We're obviously aware of it. It's a good point. I think there'll be much discussion when we start talking about the curriculum that we have and the curriculum that's going to be needed when we start next year.
Excellent. I want to thank those three people who sent in questions. They were all excellent questions. And I want to encourage others. Obviously, we're going to be having another meeting like this in a couple of weeks again. So if you have questions or things that are coming up with your kids or with your families, please feel free to email, and we'll post again on Facebook, and we'll send the message out through Brian, and hopefully we'll get some more good questions as well. All right, so that closes out audience of citizens without any cookies tonight. How about consent agenda? Does anybody have any additions or subtractions from the consent agenda as presented? No, hearing none. Do we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Seconded by Matt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Sorry, it is a little awkward as I'm thinking about the voting taking place. So when you know that there's a vote about to happen, I think unmute your microphones. We can do it with hands, but where I'm seeing, it's kind of hard to see everybody's hands. So if we have any issues, we can take a roll vote if necessary as well. All right, so that one passes.
Sorry to interrupt. Can we actually just do that for votes because it's going to make it easier for note taking?
A roll call vote?
Mm-hmm.
All right, are we okay on this one though? I believe it was unanimous on this one.
Yes.
All right, thank you. New business. Mr. Benigni, state of the district.
I know we touched on a lot of the points in our discussion initially today, but let me just review a few. One is the close of school still remains May 20th. We have a weekly governor's conference call on Fridays typically. Last week we had a commissioner's phone call, and the discussion was that it's a decision that's made in conjunction with the governor, the commissioner of education, as well as the health departments. So he did not state that we would extend beyond May 20th. So at this time, we're still holding to the May 20th for school closure. I'd like to go into the CIAC. CIAC had a meeting last week. They have, at this time, athletics. The spring seasons are on hold. They did state that they would go until June 30th with spring seasons if they could start. But they also stated there'll be no spring tournaments at that point. So they're still hoping for still having some type of spring season and going till June 30th. But that's the report from CIAC. Breakfast and lunch distribution. At this time, we've distributed over 3,300 meals, and we typically have over 200 plus students receiving meals. That's breakfast and lunch daily at Willard. As far as technology devices, we have, as I said, over 2,000 devices that have been distributed. I know that Dr. McGurk is going to speak about distance learning. I just wanted to say that we really looked at the distance learning plan in 3 phases. The first phase was the first 2 weeks, so we thought we would be closed for 2 weeks. Then we moved into the second phase, and this week we started our third phase, which is the live teaching phase. So students will be having live instruction at all levels to some degree. I want to commend the teachers and the principals for putting that together. I think it's been some diligent planning. I did receive a few phone calls from parents regarding, when is instruction going to become live? The posting is great, but my child wants to interact with their teacher. And I said, we're doing it this week. And both parents were perfect. This is just what we needed. We're all set. That's where we wanted it to go. We already talked about the budget update, school calendar. I'm going to share this time. For the school calendar, the last day is still the 17th. Graduation was scheduled for the 21st. I know that earlier you spoke about Sage. I wanted to disclose that Welty Hall is no longer available on June 21st. Welty Hall will be closed through July. So they canceled us last week. They canceled everyone. So if we were to decide to have a live event, we would have to look at a different location. And lastly, I just wanted to say that the patience that has been exhibited by the students, by the community, and the understanding, and the staff, I think that the number of positive emails outweighs the few concerned emails. And I mean, when you typically get an email, it's of concern. It's not of why isn't this or why isn't that. It's really an inquiry of how come this is not happening at this time. It's been wonderful, and it's a credit to the town. It's a credit to the community. It's a credit to the staff of how things have been rolled out and how people have responded. So I think we're in a good place. I'm excited about as I call it, the third phase of distance learning and the live instruction, as much as it may be intimidating to some degree, and it's been going on to some degree, but now it's a requirement. I think once people become comfortable with it, it will be the closest thing to actually being back in the classroom. So as a whole, I think we're in a good place. And what you said earlier tonight about the technology, we could not do it without the technology, the infrastructure, and staff that are technology savvy, as well as We have trainings that are going on weekly that staff are providing to other staff members on how to utilize Zoom and various technology devices. And we have IT staff that are, spot on and have delivered the devices as well as keeping them connected in a manner that allows us to move forward. So that's just overview of how the district is now. And then, the next step here, Rich, was to report on distance learning, which I'm going to allow Aaron to present.
Good evening, everyone. This is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent. Several of you have mentioned a few of the topics that we've already been starting to be thinking about in terms of district distance learning. So let me just tell you that the distance learning scenario has impacted many of the functions of the school district, as you're all aware. One of the things that it has impacted is the ways in which we have done registration. And typically, we've had families come to the Board of Education offices to drop off paperwork and to show their documentation. Unfortunately for us, our HR department and our business office had already been working on an online registration module. So starting back last year, we had already started to make that transition. And that has certainly been helpful as we've gone into this latest phase. We are running into just a few issues. Not everyone has technology facility with scanning and creating PDFs and uploading documents. So that while the system allows for that to happen, there are families that either don't have the technology access at home or don't feel comfortable doing that. There are a number of other things that we're looking at in terms of continued updates to distance learning. You heard Brian talk about the 3 phases. And I want you to know that each of the schools conducted a parent survey to get feedback on how distance learning has gone so far. And the feedback that we received from parents was really instrumental in helping us craft the next phase of the learning plan. I'm going to pull up a document that shows some of the schedule. And can you see this on your screens now?
No, not yet, Aaron.
Rich, it's not allowing me to share my screen.
I don't know I didn't set up the meeting. I don't know what control I have over that. Can you talk us through what you were going to show us, Aaron?
Sure. Hold on, let me see. Let me try one more thing.
Okay.
Are you seeing that now?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. So thank you. So essentially, one of the pieces of feedback that we got from parents was that at some of the levels, the parents wanted more structure and wanted more consistency about the time of days that things happened. So particularly at the middle school and high school, we created schedules that I'm showing now that have specified blocks of time for different blocks during the day to meet. And the same thing at the high school. So they have, they're essentially following the 4-day rotation with specified days and times for classes to meet. What this is doing is this is allowing teachers and students to count on times that they're available to have instruction live without overlapping across periods or causing conflicts for students who have different teachers independently setting up class meeting times. So that's a direct response to parental questions and concerns. In all of the schedules, one of the things that we heard was that some parents were looking for more structure, and some people were telling us that they needed more time to be able to catch up and to connect with their teachers individually. So we created the Wednesday schedule for communication and support, which allows us to have days where teachers are available to have one-on-one phone calls or conferences with students and to provide additional support as needed to individuals. It also gives our teachers time to do collaboration that's needed to make sure that we're consistent across the schools and across classes within the departments. A number of other things that were raised tonight. One was the idea about getting the devices back. And while initially we have considered getting all of the devices back at the end of the year, which would be typical that you turn things back in and then you redistribute it in the fall, we also have had some conversation about the fact that the computers that the students are accessing provide access to online systems such as support for reading and support for math practice that we may want to continue to give students access to across the entire summer. So because one of the concerns is the loss, I want to make sure that we're not taking devices away from homes and from families that might actually help mitigate that loss if they're available across the summer. So that's something that has not yet been determined, but another factor of this that we're considering.
Hey, Erin, can I interrupt you for 1 minute, please?
Yes.
I meant to say something when you were talking about the calendar and the new schedule that rolled out.
Yes.
And I wanted to actually call in Ryan for a minute. So Ryan, I'm curious, how closely does the current, I know it's only been 1 day in this current scheduling format, how closely would you say the level of work mirrors what you would see in a normal school day?
It's definitely less. I can definitely say that because in school, like in classes, I feel like we would get more, not busy work, but just things that, I don't know, like to me kind of seem like aren't as much like for learning purposes, but I feel like all the stuff we're getting now is really helping like the learning that we're doing in classes, because it kind of eliminates that like busy work maybe that some teachers might give like occasionally in classes.
So if you're, I think the classes were a half hour each that I saw at the high school level. Are the expectations, Erin, that there will be assignments or homework as typically would be given out outside of that half hour?
Yeah, the classroom teachers are posting assignments across the week and have work that their kids are doing outside of that half an hour. But as you can imagine, Rich, from your own experience as a teacher, one of the challenges is that kids take different amounts of time to do the work. So we have, when we did the parent survey, we had some parents respond that their children were spending 4 to 7 hours on their schoolwork, and other parents who said their kids were spending 2 or 3 hours a day on their schoolwork. So, for the families that are saying that their kids are already doing 4 to 7 hours worth of work, they're not looking for us to add more to that. And, it's a delicate balance with all of the other things that families are facing right now.
Yep, I wasn't suggesting adding more. I was just curious from a student's perspective, how it kind of compared. So Ryan, you think at this point you can manage the time? You have 4 hours, then you have a little bit of homework in the afternoon. That's a manageable amount for a typical student or a typical good student, Ryan?
Yeah, for me, it works really well.
And you get the flexibility, as you mentioned before, of being able to do the work when you want to later in the day. All right. Thank you very much. Erin, yeah. I apologize for interrupting.
Okay. I would say, although this is certainly not intended, one of the consequences of the current scenario is that kids that are transitioning from high school to college are getting an experience that is much more like a college experience where students have to have more control over managing their time and their schedules than they typically do when a lot of that is dictated by the daily schedule. So just to continue, we have continued to play out some of the different scenarios. I think, Rich, you used the term fluid, which I think captures well the feeling that we're all having right now. We're thinking about things like how kids get their belongings back that are in the classrooms that they left in March, thinking they were going to be back in 10 days. We have lockers at the high school that have things in them that both need to be returned to the schools and need to go home with kids. We need to figure out ways to get the classrooms broken down to prepare for summer cleaning. And we are not yet having teachers allowed to go into the classrooms. But even if they were allowed to be in right now, we're not sure if the message, because as you noted, the school closing date is only May 20th. We don't yet know if they should be breaking down for the rest of the year or if they need to leave things set up because we could be back for a couple of weeks at the end of the school year. We've started to plan ahead for the fall. I'm going to borrow Eileen Eustace's phrase. Eileen says there are today decisions and tomorrow decisions. There are things that we're able to decide on right now, and there are things we just don't know yet. I've had people start to ask me lots of questions about things like what classes will look like in the fall, if we're thinking about altering the master schedules to have fewer students in the building at a time. I've had people have been talking about things like alternate week schedules, alternate day schedules, morning sessions and afternoon sessions. And to be honest, we just don't know what any of that's going to look like yet. So while we're starting to think about those, and Brian and I are both part of a number of networks that give us opportunities to interact with other school and district leaders to help brainstorm ideas about what that might look like. We're just not quite there yet. So the last part of my distance learning update that I want to share with you tonight is where we are around grading. And to do this, I'm going to share something on my screen again. So one of the things I want you to know is that we are trying in all of our models to follow the guidance from the Connecticut State Department of Ed. So on April 8th, guidance went out from the commissioner to the superintendents, encouraging us to view the second half of the 2020 school year as a special case in terms of grading GPAs and transcripts. That acknowledges the fact that all students and staff are working under challenging conditions, and encouraging districts to focus priorities on student engagement and learning, and further suggesting that schools adopt a locally guided pass-fail protocol for grading while providing continued educational opportunities. So one of the things that this means for us is that we had to look at the models that are in place for current grading and reporting across our three levels of education. So as you all know, at the elementary school, we have standards-based grading. At the middle school, we have a letter-based grading system. And at the high school, we have a 0 to 100 number-based system. The modifications that we'll make moving forward are all in alignment with this recommendation from the CSDE, but they look a little different at each of the three levels based on the grading systems that were currently in place and the impact of a change in the grading system at that particular level. So at the elementary school, where we currently have standards-based reporting, it's just not possible for individual classroom teachers to gather all of the data that would be necessary for them to report out on each one of the individual standards. And for that reason, we've asked the elementary teachers to instead write narrative comments that reflect on students' growth and progress across the year for each of the students in their homeroom classes. At the middle school level, where we have a grading system in place that is a more traditional grading system, our final grades for the report card at the end of trimester 3 will be 3 levels. There will be a pass with distinction, a pass, and the lowest grade will be a distance learning incomplete. And we decided on the phrasing of the distance learning incomplete in that when we're looking at middle school age students, some of the reasons that middle school students are not fully engaged in the work is really is not completely under their control as a 12-year-old or as an 11-year-old. At the middle school, the impact of a change on the final transcript grade has little impact on their future. Their final report cards will show the grades for each of the separate 3 trimesters. So it would show the letter grade for trimester 1, the letter grade for trimester 2, and the final report card grade for this situation. As you can imagine, at the high school, this is, excuse This is much more complicated. And at the high school, there are a couple of things that Eileen and the high school leadership and teachers have been working towards. One is protecting the integrity of the transcript, and two is trying to maintain as much consistency as possible with all of the ways that transcripts impact students as they move forward in the future. So one of the things that we're looking at is making sure that the grade that will be impacted is the grade for quarter 4 grade. So grades that are already in place for quarters 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 stay in place, and just the quarter 4 grade will be impacted. The grade 4 quarter grades will have the same grading language around pass with distinction and pass. We will have failing grades at the high school for students who are not completing work and not engaging in the distance learning work. At the high school, however, one of the things that needed to happen was that the pass with distinction, the pass and the failing grade need to be assigned a numeric value for final grade calculation. And as I scroll down, you'll see that we're essentially changing the weighting. So if you look at a full year course, the top row here that has the original weighting shows that in a typical year, each quarter counts for 20% of the final grade. The mid-year exam counts for 10% and the final exam counts for 10%. Under our adjustment for this year, we're re-weighting quarter 1 and quarter 2. So at quarter 3, quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3. So they will each count 25%. The mid-year exam stays at 10%. Quarter 4 will be weighted at 15%, and there will be no exam given in this unusual final quarter. And for the quarter semester courses, we've also shifted the weighting so that quarter 3 will be 60% of the grade, quarter 4 will be 40% as shown here. What this will—
Erin, I apologize, but you're not presenting. We can't see. You're talking like you're referring to a document, but we can't see the document, just so you're aware.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Not yet.
While Erin's trying to get the document up there, do any other board members— she's presented a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of the academics, the curriculum, the grading switchover, the live synchronous teaching, anything that they want addressed?
Can you see this now?
It's up.
Yeah, it's up. Thank you.
I apologize. I wish you had said that you couldn't see what I was showing you. So do you want me to go back?
I don't think you need to. We were able to follow the conversation. We just couldn't see the document you're referring to.
Okay. So I'm just pausing here for a moment at the quarter 4 grade at the high school with the pass with distinction, the pass, the fail, and then the last column shows the numeric value that the pass with distinction, pass or fail will have in terms of the final grade calculation. And then when I was showing you the highlights, what I was showing you was essentially the way that the weighting will change for this particular year, so that the 4th quarter has a 15% impact on the overall grade as opposed to the 20% that it would typically have. We think this is important because there are a lot of things that are weighing into student performance, engagement, and participation during this very unusual situation. We know that there are families that are undergoing significant stress and their own challenges with unemployment and food insecurity and everything else that is impacting families. So we're trying to be as cautious as we can in a do no harm type of approach to this. I do want to comment on just a couple of other things specifically related to the high school, and that is that the senior capstone course was pass-fail previously. It continues to be pass-fail. It did not calculate into the student's overall CUME, but it remains as a graduation requirement, and the capstone teachers are working with their teachers individually and in groups to make sure that they're supported in meeting that graduation requirement. I'm going to pause but leave this document up so that Eileen can weigh in and see if I missed anything or if you have questions that one of us can answer.
Erin, Eileen Eustace, Principal Berlin High School. Can you scroll up a little bit? There's just one other thing I want to point out. Yes, to this part. So basically what we are going to move, the default is going to be that all students will move into this pass with distinction, pass or fail. A student can opt for their numerical grade. Really, the only time it is advantageous for you is if you have a numerical grade of over a 93. So students that have above a 93 can opt in for the numerical grade so that the higher grade is calculated into their cumulative average. So obviously teachers would work to advise students to make sure they come out with the best outcome possible. So I just wanted to make sure that that was pointed out as well.
And this is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent. I really want to give a shout out to Eileen and the leadership team at the high school. They have worked really hard with this over quite a period of time, working with Laura Curtis to think about how this would work in the Power School system. But the approach that the high school leadership team took on this was really looking ahead and thinking about the kids that are in as earning grades as underclassmen now and how this could have a long-term impact on their transcript as they apply for colleges, and also thinking about all of the other things that connect to this, such as class rank and National Honor Society. They've really worked hard to make sure that they've considered all of those different aspects of this complicated work.
So we are concerned about one of the things we took all of our classes into account with this, but in particular, our students that are juniors right now with the SAT pretty much on hold for them for an indefinite period of time. The transcript is really going to probably be of greater importance for their post-secondary planning. And as admissions offices are taking a look at that, because it's going to be a little difficult to know if they're going to have to make an adjustment to the SAT or when they're actually going to have an opportunity to take the SAT or be able to take it multiple times as they normally would. So it was really important for us to really not stop the cumulative GPA clock and protect the integrity of the transcript, which will show a numeric Y1 grade.
If I could just comment that, as Erin spoke of earlier, the various groups that we all belong to across the state, I know that looking at the high school grading system that Eileen, you met and spoke to numerous other principals and what they were doing to come up with this plan. So I just don't want anyone in the community to think that this plan was something that is totally unique to Berlin. It has a twist that works for Berlin, but it's definitely something that's being used or similar that's being used in other areas of the state.
Does any members of the board have any questions? Thank you. Erin, was there anything else in terms of what you wanted to present to us right now?
There is not.
Okay, so thank you very much to both of you, or actually all three of you. I appreciate the information. I know that a tremendous amount of time and effort and energy goes into creating all of these systems that didn't exist before. So it's also very difficult to try to envision every possible option in the future and what this means. So I do understand the hard work that goes into this and the insight as well. So next up, I believe Dr. McGurk, you're up again, and that's a brief account of our next generation accountability report.
Am I good?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't miss the brief part of that, Rich.
Sorry.
So just to let all of you know, there's a copy of this in the Schoology folder for you. So if I go too fast, which I was requested to go through this at a pace, all of the information is in the folder. This presentation's in the folder. Much of the documentation, as you know, from the Next Generation Accountability pulls together information that you've seen from other settings. So you know that in addition to looking at the test scores, the accountability system takes some other aspects into account. And you see on the slide here some of the reasons for that, including guarding against us looking at just tested subjects and really focusing very narrowly on one part of the curriculum, but also thinking about ways that we create well-balanced experiences for all of our students. So on this slide shows the 12 indicators of the Accountability Index. I just want to note here when we're looking at accountability achievement scores, the achievement measures that are combined here are the Smarter Balanced assessment, the SAT assessment, and the alternate assessment for our most significantly impacted students. So where you've seen those scores individually in the past, the mechanics behind the Accountability Index pull those scores together for this particular report. So you'll see those 12. So you had the sort of the large print version before. This is the smaller print version, which is the overall Accountability Index report. And in this column that shows the percent earned, the percent of the point earned, in the best of all possible worlds, we're trying to score 100% of the points in each one of these categories. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you here, the differences between last year and this year. One of the things that I did that you can see when you look at this in your Schoology folder is that I highlighted in red this areas that were slightly down from last year and highlighted in green the areas that were up from last year. So when you look across the areas, while you may be alarmed to see, for example, 4 red areas, those 4 red areas, all the ELA performance index here, which is the overall performance, and then the growth index here, those 4 are all very tightly connected to one another. So one shows the performance of all of our students, including our high needs students. The second shows just the performance of our high needs students. And then these 2 scores down here show the high needs student, the growth scores for all of our students and for the high needs students. You see that in math, as we showed on some of the other assessments previous, the math scores combined across grades 3 to 8 and the SAT at the high school showed an uptick in performance in math for all students, for our high needs students, and upticks in growth for all students and for our high needs students. I want to highlight one other particular area. One area that you see in number 12 at the bottom that you see a particular drop off is our score for arts access. This is a measure of kids taking art classes at the high school, courses that count in the arts area, which also include our music courses. And that's a very significant drop from 86.8% of the points to 68.6%. And I just want to remind the board that this is based on data from the year that we cut one of the art teachers from the high school and moved that position to the elementary level, but we lost a position in the department. On the next slide, I'm showing some comparative data. I was asked to put this together in terms of some of the district data that the names of the sort of surrounding towns and towns that people are often curious to see how we measure up against. I want to say that in general, I've heard some pushback about the level of performance of the Berlin schools, as if there's some crazy drop off of a cliff this year. With the data doesn't show that. The data shows, much like many of these other districts, that the performance varies a bit from year to year, and Berlin has been higher than we were this year in comparison to the other towns, and we've also been lower comparatively. The next slide looks at two specific areas of gap indicators. One is gaps in performance indexes, and what this essentially means is that the state is looking at achievement gaps between the non-high needs rate of students passing, reaching the desired performance index, and the students who are in the high needs group. So the high needs group includes students who receive special education services, kids who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and kids who are English learners. And so the state looks at the gap in Berlin and compares that to the size of the gap at the state level. And if our gap is larger than the state gap, we're considered an outlier. And that's what's indicated here with the Y for the gap in math performance. So I did just want you to note that the gap was reduced from a gap of 19.9 last year to a gap of 17.9, but the gap of 17.9 is still slightly larger than the 17.6 gap. In the participation rate overall, we did not have any issues with overall participation rates across the district. The next slide shows the individual accountability indexes for the scores for the individual schools. You'll see that they also look at participation. And so one thing that you'll note is that at Griswold, we had one additional student who did not participate in the test that pushed us from acceptable participation rates to a not acceptable participation rate of 93.9%. So in terms of participation, obviously the target is to have 100% of the students participate. We are required to make the testing opportunity available to all students, but families, for a variety of reasons, including things like student anxiety and some for other reasons, including their special education status, choose to have their children not participate in the test. It particularly impacts Griswold this year because there's a cohort of students at grade 5 whose families wanted them not to participate. And because the grade 5 science test is just one grade, it particularly impacted the level there. When we look at the last category where you see the overall ranking, the schools that achieve overall accountability indexes of 85 to 100% are ranked in the first category, category 1. The schools that have indexes between 70 and 84.9 are category 2 schools, and that includes all of our schools. But when you see the schools that are listed as category 3 schools are bumped down a level from their achievement level, from the level that would be assigned based strictly on performance, if they either have an issue with participation or if there's an achievement gap. So both McGee and Berlin High School had achievement gaps between non-high needs students and high needs students in ELA and math. And that caused their ranking to be dropped to a level 3, which is the same level it was last year. The next 3 slides show in relatively great detail the efforts to increase the accountability index score. I think it's important for you to know it as a board that we do look at this very carefully. We've made some adjustments that we were hoping would show in this year's scores, but now with the cancellation of the test, we won't know until sometime in the future the impact that those scores have, those strategies have. For example, at the middle school, we added an instructional coach to provide more support to classroom teachers and to help us provide additional support to students in English language arts. We requested but did not receive funding for a math interventionist at the middle school. And programmatically, we're looking at curriculum issues, particularly across 612, to address some of the concerns that we see in the data. And that is that, Rich.
Thank you very much, Erin. I appreciate that. It was thorough and brief at the same time. I appreciate that, which is a long agenda tonight and a lot to cover, but all obviously very important information. Especially important, I thought, was the explanation of why schools get bumped from a 2 to a 3, even though their numbers are within the range of the 2. You have one outlier group or you have one achievement gap and it knocks you down into the 3. It doesn't necessarily mean the entire school is functioning at a lower level. You just have a very small subgroup. In Griswold's case, there were a couple of kids, had they chosen to take that science test, would have maintained the 2 status, I believe is what you were saying.
Yes, and it's I want to be clear. It's not the students that are choosing not to participate.
Yeah, you're correct. I'm sorry. It was, yes, I understand. I said it wrong. All right, thank you. Brian, I think we're next up on the agenda is the status of the Board of Ed adopted budget. You're muted, Brian.
Sorry, Brian Benigni, Superintendent. As was stated earlier, we have a 3.2% increase to the 2022-2021 budget. That being, there's 4 positions that we're able to retain. They were mentioned earlier. A world language teacher to meet the credit requirements by the new high school state mandated high school credit 25. The second being the lead teacher at McGee / interventionist at McGee. And the third being the technology position that was eliminated last year, which will be reinstated to allow each school to have tech integration. And the fourth being that the computer IT person, which will work as a computer tech. And one of the biggest focuses will be on the security systems and the cameras that were purchased. In order to maintain those positions, we did make some significant reductions in equipment and supplies and things. But we really believe those positions are necessary for us to keep the district moving forward. So that is where we are with the budget at this time.
And then, as it was mentioned earlier by Matt and you, Brian, I believe the plan is to hopefully augment some of the equipment that we're going to need with end of the year funds based on where we stand at the end.
Absolutely. End of the year funds and choice funds, yes.
Thank you very much. And next up on the agenda, the non-renewal of contracts, Brian.
Yes. We have several positions here that were hired for 1-year assignments, as long as long-term subs. So that would be Abby Balfour, Christopher Dipolino, Justin Farrell, and Jennifer Sulo. It's been our practice to non-renew them officially in the board minutes, even though they were on a 1-year contract. So we'll need a motion here.
Yep, we need a motion here. Somebody, please.
I move that the contracts of employment for the following non-tenured teachers not be renewed for the 2020-2021 school year upon their expiration at the end of the current school year. Abby Balfour, Christopher Dipolino, Justin Farrell, and Jennifer Sulo. Tim Oakes, board member.
Do we have a second?
Second. Julia Dennis, board member.
All right, now it's been requested. Does anybody have any conversation on this or any points or questions before we get to a vote? All right, it's been requested that we vote in a roll call manner to make it much easier given our current format. So I'll call up your name to say yes or no in terms of being in favor of the motion. Adam Selena?
Yes.
Julia Dennis?
Yes.
Carrie Sasso?
Yes.
Where are Jamie Miller?
Yes.
Mary Ellen Maloney?
Yes.
Tim Oakes?
Yes.
Tracy Sisti?
Yes.
Matt Tenza,
Yes.
and I will also vote yes. So it's unanimous. Thank you very much. And Brian, I believe next up is the Healthy Food Certification Statement. I can't wait to see who's going to make the motion on this one.
Well, I think most of you are aware, in order to be eligible for the participate in a healthy food certification, we have to take action to certify whether all food items sold to students will meet the Connecticut Nutritional Guidelines, published in pursuant to Section 1021E of the Connecticut General Statutes, period July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021. So it's the same thing we've done, that we're not providing the sugary beverages, that our food meets the criteria, which then makes us eligible to participate in the program and receive to purchase food that is reimbursed at a lower rate and so on. So we typically have done this every year. And this is just more of a formality. By doing this and putting it in the minutes, it makes us eligible for our food service to continue to provide the same services and be accessible to those foods that the government allows us to purchase, those commodities.
Thank you. Who's going to take a deep breath and give me a motion?
I'll take a shot at it.
All right.
All right. I'll move that the Berlin Board of Education will participate in the optional healthy food certification program pursuant to CGS Section 10-215F for the 2020-2021 school year, and certify that all food items offered for sale to students in the schools under its jurisdiction and not exempted from the Connecticut Nutrition Standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut Nutrition Standards. The board will exclude from certification food items that do not meet the Connecticut Nutrition Standards, provided that the following conditions are met. 1, the sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. 2, the sale is at the location of the event. And 3, the food items are not sold from a vending machine or school store. The board will allow the sale to students of beverages not listed in Section 10-221Q of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided the following conditions are met. 1, the sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. 2, the sale is at the location of the event. And 3, the beverages are not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice meeting or extracurricular activity. The regular school day is a period from midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food beverage sales.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Second. Carrie says second.
Oh, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. Carrie seconds. Any questions or comments?
Good job, Adam.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. So let's take the vote. I'll go around again quickly with a roll. Adam?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Mary Ellen?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
And Tim?
Aye.
And I will also vote yes, so it's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Special thank you to Tim on that one. To Adam on that one. All right, next up, facilities related. Mr. Cogno.
Evening, everybody. Just a couple of quick things on facilities. I wanted to let you know that the project that has been planned and put together at McGee Gym and Wellness Room is underway. The town has bid that job out. We've gone through all the scoping of the contractor, who's named Scholar Painting from Seymour. They gave us a very good bid. We've also added on some adjustments to the project to make it even a little better than we originally planned. That project is what actually could start right now because, of course, there's no one in the schools, but we've decided to delay because we don't know certainly exactly if the school is going to open up again. So I'll be speaking to Brian about that a little more on whether we want to, make sure we can stay out of the gym and the wellness room from this point forward, or we're going to wait until the school. In any event, we have time to finish the project before the school opens next year. So that's going very well, and it came in under budget, so we're pleased. The second thing, and the only other thing I want to report on, is the security grant, which you folks heard about over the last year and a half or so, is coming to completion. If you recall, we were awarded a grant by the Department of Homeland Security for $749,000. Part of it paid by us, part of it paid by them, naturally. But it was to do a number of things in our schools. The first phase, we completed a lot of things with cameras in a number of the schools. Our second phase, which is under completion right now, is radio systems for the schools and also access control for the central office. We will be spending all the grant money, and we expect to have it be completed by the end of the grant period, which is July 30th. So that ends up being what I consider a successful grant because it did what we're supposed to do on time. And I believe looking all the people that were involved in picking the items to be spent and also the way we got pricing, I think it was done very efficiently. So that's all I have as an update for facilities at the moment.
I appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Jeff? No, hearing none. Thank you very much. Let's move on to graduation. Brian.
So Eileen and I have had many discussions about graduation, and I'd like to share with the board, with Eileen also adding in here, where we are with things. Number one being that we found out last week that Welty Hall is no longer available to us on the 21st. But even prior to that, both of us, and Eileen, I hope I speak for both of us, believe that we should have graduation on the 21st. If we are not able to have a graduation in person, that we stick to that date and have a virtual graduation. We believe that with our tech resources that we could do a fine job of producing a graduation that would be aired at that time. We wouldn't do it live, but it would be aired almost seemingly as if it was taking place, utilizing a green screen and so on. That being the case, I'm involved with the Hartford area superintendents, and I can read to you or share with you that there's been a list of such as Glastonbury believes that they have to have a virtual graduation at this point. That is too risky to have another way. Enfield looking into virtual ceremony with input for students. You're seeing more and more towns looking into virtual graduation. Most towns are looking at something virtual, and then our discussion was to wait until July or August with the hopes that it could be live, and then not be. We'd be missing that date, that planned date that people have in mind. We much rather have a virtual graduation, if need to be virtual, on the 21st, than to have something else in July or August if the restrictions allow us to, some type of celebration where this could be in person. What that would be, we'd have to brainstorm. But we definitely wanted to hear from the board and what we thought your thoughts were of extending things and waiting and hopefully for July and August to go live. Obviously, if the 21st is safe, I know that Welty's not available. Even if it had to be at Sage, we could do something of that nature. But that's where we were in our discussion, and we've discussed it several times. Eileen, I don't know if you want to add anything first and then allow the board to comment.
I think you shared a lot of the thoughts. We do have some preliminary, plan B going on in terms of, if we had a pre-recorded virtual ceremony, that we would have some sort of live component, whether it was a car parade where people come by the high school and pick up their diplomas, and we permit staff to line the sidewalk. We've talked about working with the police department to be able to have a parade through town, and then also to determining when we actually decide to have something will also then help us predetermine some other things that we want to do so that we can have some fanfare around being able to pick up caps and gowns, hand delivering care packages to seniors that have other various things in them. and also different types of recognitions. So if there are restrictions that are lifted in the summertime, we talked a little bit about being able to put together a one-day celebration where we would bring students together, and we were brainstorming this with senior students already, where you did a one day where you would, maybe have some sort of outdoor event where students would be able to sign yearbooks together, have a picnic, then maybe go home and change and put their prom clothes on if they actually already have an outfit for prom, and come back to the high school at night. And that's really, a lot of that really depends if the large group gathering restrictions are in place. Brian, one of the things I was thinking about today, though, is I am a little concerned even at Sage. The stands it's not huge. And if you're going to restrict people and have them spread out, that could present a challenge. And then you may have to have chairs and equipment on the new turf. If we were permitted to go outside, we might be able to do something. I was thinking, even brainstorming today, could we potentially use New Britain Stadium if the governor lifts something like that, where we really could spread out and do something there as well. So I think there's lots of options in play here. But I think somewhat of a timeline is going to be important to start putting some things in motion and being able to start to have some communications with families as well.
Yeah, I just think the first piece is, does the board feel the 21st is an important date, that we have something on that date, whether it's virtual or live, is it important to hold to that date? I think that's the first question. And then the other questions can fall after that. So, Rich, I'd like to turn it back to you for the board for discussion.
Sure. I think this is obviously a very large issue for the community as a whole. Now, Brian and I have talked about this at length. Before I share my opinions, I really would like to hear from other people. What are your thoughts about maintaining the 21st as a specific date of doing something if we're able to get the governor to lift the restrictions? Are we locked into, that's Father's Day, correct? That's Sunday, Father's Day still. Yep.
Hi, Rich. Jamie Miller, board member. I just want to say, for a sense of normalcy, I absolutely would agree with keeping it on Father's Day. I don't think, if there's restrictions lifted or whatnot, we're still going to be following some sort of, social distancing and whatnot. I think it's already planned for the seniors, their families. So I agree with Brian that that's probably a good idea to keep it that day, whatever we choose to do. But I'm in agreement to having it on that day.
Thank you, Jamie. Does anybody else want to weigh in or ask questions?
Hi, this is Mary Ellen, Board of Ed member. I don't think the virtual is going to fly. I don't think the date of June 21st is as important as the actual event of some type of live graduation, even if they have to postpone it to the summer. I know that's what my son's college has done, his graduation scheduled for August 9th now. So I think there'll be quite an uproar from senior parents with the idea of having a virtual graduation.
Thank you very much. Just to reply to that, I know this is something Brian and I have talked about as well. If we don't mark the moment, and then we're not able to get together in August or July or August, have we missed the opportunity for the community to create something to mark the moment of normalcy, as Jamie was saying? And Mary Ellen, I get it completely. We've gone back and forth on this issue. I'm interested in hearing from more people as well, please.
I have a question.
You have to introduce yourself, please, Tracy.
Oh, Tracy, Board of Ed member. I have a question. Are you I don't know that I would have an opinion or either way, because my children aren't at that age. I would probably more curious to the seniors right now, maybe from the students and the parents, as to what's important that date, being live, being virtual, like if we're social distancing still, what's their ideas, or have you asked them, or have they been polled, or, because quite frankly, I'm not sure either way, I'm okay. I just am curious if it matters to them, like what's most important.
Eileen, have you had the chance? I think you said earlier you were meeting with kids.
So I have spoken with senior class officers and a few other senior students in some various meetings, and they did talk about preserving graduation. They've done something, but we have not specifically offered the option. My hesitation has been to put something out there because I also wanted to provide a little bit of I didn't know what the direction of the board was going to be, if we were going to lean one way or another. And so my plan is to put out a survey for availability of seniors to come and weigh in and have some focus groups. So I would be having those focus groups next week with seniors.
Julia Dennis, board member. I'm going to try and talk about my dog's barking. Sorry. I think, I know this is a really difficult time for seniors, but unfortunately, I think like with the virtual thing, I think if Berlin's doing it, it's probably going to be happening statewide. I know in my district, we actually had a staff meeting last week, and they were talking about using a production company from Los Angeles that's worked with like Dancing with the Stars or something, create like a really high quality professional virtual graduation. And then on the flip side, they're trying to coordinate other activities like a parade through town where like parents and seniors all kind of get in their cars and go around and doing something like that. But I know Mary Ellen's point is legit, like that's not going to necessarily fly in town. But I think looking at it from a statewide and a nationwide perspective, it's going to be everywhere, not just unique to Berlin. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Julia. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to weigh in or ask any questions?
Yes, Carrie Sassy, board member. I'm wondering if we can't kind of meet in the middle and have some marker, some mark of the occasion at the end of the school year, something held on June 21st that might acknowledge the end, the seniors' accomplishments and allow them to sort of naturally pass through what would be the calendar progression from, being a senior in high school, graduating, to enjoying their summer, to preparing for college. And then if in which case restrictions are lifted, we could potentially have some form of ceremony later in the summer. So I'm wondering if we could try and make everyone, I don't know, have there be some degree of normalcy in terms of following the what would be the normal calendar, but also allowing for there to be a greater celebration of sorts at a later point in time once things are lifted. I don't know if that's, financially responsible or feasible, but I wonder if it might satisfy folks who fall into both camps.
Thank you, Carrie. Eileen, I think that actually you did address that a little bit. So correct me if I'm wrong. I want to kind of get a picture of what you're proposing or what you'd like to see, at least on the surface, doing something virtual to mark the day of graduation, maybe in conjunction with something physical in the town, like the parades, something like that, where the kids are out and the community gets to celebrate. But then later in the summer, hopefully, if the restrictions get lifted, do some sort of a celebration, as Carrie was alluding to, in person. Is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yes, what we were talking about in terms of a virtual for June 21st would be actually a replication of the graduation ceremony itself. We talked about, basically running through the same program that we would pre-record the speeches from our class president, our valedictorian, salutatorian. We have a couple of different ways where we'll be able to have students in their caps and gowns, whether they submit a photo. We've talked a little bit about letting them come in and film, having them walk across the stage at the high school as well, as a way to put some sort of video together. And then we would also add some moments from that particular day, if we did where they come to the high school to actually physically pick up their diploma and, something of a car parade, which a lot of people have talked about. But we talked about then in the summertime, really having more of like a day of celebration, whether it's like a community picnic or celebration, outside on school grounds or someplace else with, families, depending on how many people we can have together, or we do something specifically with the seniors. But, I think part of the concern is, in listening to the news, there's a lot of concern about any of those restrictions being lifted this summer. And then the more, if we keep say we're going to hold out till July or we're going to hold out till August, and if the restrictions aren't listed, I think there is some concern that we've lost the moment then, because people, our seniors, as tough as it is, are going to need some bit of closure as well, so that they can start their next step, which may also be a difficult next step for them if they, depending on what the plans are in the fall at various institutions.
Can I just make a comment, Rich?
Mm-hmm.
If we prepared for a virtual and we said we're going to delay, this is just based, I'm thinking what Mary Ellen said, and we said we're going to delay and hold off until, pick a cutoff date, students that are going back to school, if school's in session to fall, and we said we're not going to do it on the 21st, but we're going to prepare a virtual, whether it gets used or not. If for some reason we can't do something by the end of July, beginning of August, then we roll the virtual then? Is that, because I guess there's two frames of thought here. One is you actually have the graduation virtually on the 21st, and then you do another event. Or as Carrie said, you do something on the 21st, whether it's parade through town, and then you hold off the graduation and try to schedule for August. But if the restrictions aren't lifted, then you go virtual at that point, and you roll the virtual. It's displayed at 7:00 at night, and you pick the date, and everyone's at their TV sets, and it's displayed. I don't know which is better to do. I don't know if it's a letdown or anticlimactic to not to have a virtual on the 21st, saying you're definitely not going to have the real graduation, or it's better to go the opposite route. But I think we need to have the two. I think it's just a question of order and date.
Okay, so on the table, and I'm not done. We're gonna still continue to talk. I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions or say their piece. But it appears to be that we have a virtual graduation and some kind of a live event, whether the live event is in summer or whether the live event is in June, is really the question on the table. But we do have to come to a consensus tonight, because the next meeting isn't for several more weeks. I think it's 3 weeks away. And quite frankly, that's not enough time. I can see Eileen shaking her head. We're creating a whole new system. We're building something from scratch. We need to come to a consensus tonight. So please ask questions. Have your voices heard now.
Rich, this is Matt Tenza. Having to go through this with my own college senior, I know how much this particular class of 2020 has already lost. The activity list is long and painful. I believe that we should honor the graduation date with a virtual graduation of the highest quality that we can produce. And if that means we need to go outside, no disrespect to our staff, but if that means we have to go outside, then that's what that means. And plan on scheduling a big celebration for these kids at some point when restrictions are lifted, provided they are. I mean, we're hearing now that, distancing is going to continue. State parks may or may not be open and available as they have been 100%, which leads me to believe that there are plans to keep things maybe not locked down the way they are now, but somewhat, and it's going to make things difficult. But regardless as to what we do, these kids deserve to be celebrated in any way that we can provide that to them, because they've lost so much already.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody else with an opinion or questions they'd like to ask?
Rich, Jamie Meller, board member. I just have one more thing I'd like to add in. I think, like what Eileen was saying, if we did the virtual graduation on the 21st, but in addition to that, I think that we know, regardless of whether social distancing restrictions lift or whatnot, why couldn't we make like Eileen said, a huge town-wide, parade drive-through? People can be standing on their doorsteps. We can have I think that doing something along those lines where you're driving on Farmington Ave or New Britain Ave, or, where people can at least stand out, business owners or whatnot, they still have their distance from one another, but it's a huge deal for our kids. It's something we can do regardless, whether, Griswold just did a fantastic parade the other day. They went all through town. People were able to stand outside. I think that would be a great idea. We know that we can do it. We can still do the virtual graduation. And then, like Eileen said, if later in the summer the restrictions lift and we can do that outdoor, picnic, and then they put on their prom dresses later at night, great. If that doesn't come to fruition, well, then they did this fantastic parade through town. They'll never forget it. And we have the high quality graduation on the 21st. Yes, it'll be virtual, not the way they'd like it to be. But again, it's trying to make it the best, like Matt said, the best that it possibly can be for these kids. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jamie. And I did want to echo, I saw the Griswold parade pass by my house. It was fantastic. The idea that we are, at that point, it's, hey, we missed the teachers and the teachers waving to the kids. I love the idea of the kids being the center point of the town for that day, the seniors out there. And again, now I'm also wondering, I know we're talking about 12th grade graduation, but we also have other ceremonies and other celebrations that take place. We have to continue to look to them as well, whether it's some kind of an 8th grade moment or a kindergarten moment. I know we're looking into all of these, and I don't want them to feel like they're neglected. Does anybody else have questions, though, specifically, or comments? Adam, I see you clicked off. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, just a few comments. More from a logistics standpoint, as you mentioned, I think that the as much as I would love to see the graduation on the 21st outside at either Sage or even renting Willowbrook and New Britain so people could spread out, I just don't know that we're going to be able to get from a social distancing of 0 to thousands within a couple months. I think they would be prudent, for the high school to plan to hand out the caps and gowns, get diplomas, printed and everything, and give the kids an opportunity to either have a video of them walking across the stage or have a picture of them in cap and gown with diploma, and get that thing rolling now because we're already into April, and be able to plan for it. If we kick something out until August, it might never happen. If we kick something out that far, you might lose a lot of the students, and they might just say, you know what, the moment's passed. I'm already thinking about college. Forget high school. I think we've got to do something on the 21st. And though I completely agree with Mary Ellen, virtual is not what I would want for my own child by any means. But I think that we have to plan for that. And if nothing else, even if we do, if the governor does reduce the restrictions and we can't have a graduation, then maybe they have a keepsake now. They have a video. But I think that we've got a plan for the virtual for the 21st. And then, for having a big townwide event, it could be at the Berlin Fairgrounds. If we need more space, it could be at the high school. There's a number of different things I'm sure that we could do. But, if we can go inside that with some kind of parade on the 21st, I think we've got to try to do as much as we can, as others have said, to celebrate the seniors. But I think the 21st has got to stay in some form or fashion.
This is Mary Ellen, Board of Ed member. First of all, my phone is blowing up with texts from senior parents who are watching. So I guess I have a bit of a pulse on things. I agree with a little bit with Eileen. I agree with Brian. I agree with Adam, a little bit of everything. I just don't know that we can rush into a final decision tonight. I would rather see us have another meeting, to discuss this and think this through a little bit, because maybe Eileen and Brian and Rich, you've all been discussing it, but this is new to me, and I would like an opportunity to think about it. I will not vote on this tonight. I just can't, because I can't make a decision this quickly on something this important, and something that's so important to so many of my friends' children. So
I actually agree with Mary Ellen on that matter, because I think first and foremost, we learned our lesson a few years back with moving on graduation without necessarily having the pulse. Mary Ellen mentioned that she's getting texts from parents who are texting her right now that are watching. And I think we just really need to take our time. So if that means we have a meeting in 2 weeks, or even a week, or so on and so forth, I think that's going to be the best bet. But I agree with what everyone has said so far today, and also echo what Adam just said. So I'm in agreement with both of you guys.
Okay, so go ahead, Adam. You have something to say?
No, I was just going to say, this is an extremely difficult thing to try to discuss, and I agree with everybody that I don't think we're going to come to any conclusion this evening. I'm just going to say that it's such an important milestone for so many people that regardless of what we do, we're not going to make everybody happy, but we're going to have to come up with what we think is the best course of action going forward. And I think it's going to be a combination of continuing the dialogue. I'd be curious from Eileen, her discussions with students, and I agree. We could have a meeting every day of the week if we needed to. Virtually, you could do anything. So, I mean, to have another meeting next week is not a big deal for me. But I do want to make sure that we celebrate these students in the best possible way we can without missing the boat, though, either. We can't go too far because we can't predict what's going to happen in June, July, and August. We want to make sure that we actually we properly recognize them as much as we can. But like I said, I'm more curious to hear what some of the students have to say, maybe and it could be reported back to us for a follow-up meeting.
Okay, so I think there's another angle too that we want to keep in mind. If we do try to put something together over the summer and simply postpone, there could easily be a significant amount of parents who won't allow their kids to attend because of health fears. That's out there. We don't know what the world is going to look like in July or August, at least not our local world. Eileen, can you give us a sense of a timetable? For example, there's 2 questions I have. One would be, when do you think you can gather enough information directly from the kids to be able to come back to us and say, this is what the voices are telling me? And then the second piece would be, how much time do you need? Because I don't want to delay our decision so long that you can't do the job.
I would work to have open forums as quickly as possible so that if we were going to convene sometime next week, I can give you some added feedback. So my plan was to put a survey out tomorrow to see when students would be available. And then it's also, quite frankly, it's going to be a matter of them showing up virtually to give some feedback. And I will also work with the class officers to try to encourage students, and I'll have the class officers at these forums as well. So I can certainly come back next week with some information from the students. And I just, knowing the logistics that are involved in this, we need time.
Eileen, you're breaking up. We can't hear what you're saying.
A quality production of some sort, whether it's going to be live. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. So I just want to make sure that we have an appropriate timetable to put a quality product together. And whether we decide to contract out with someone, that's fine. But we're also going to need time to find a production place. And I think a lot of other high schools are going to be using production places. And we want to see what the services, we have been already looking into a lot of these things as a just in case, a backup plan. But it is going to take time to coordinate. So, getting all of the caps and gowns out to everybody, all of that, all those kinds of things, take time. And then if you're looking to get something back from them, whether it's a photograph or having them come in for a video, you have to spread those out over days. Otherwise, you're bringing large groups of people together in the building, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So the point is, like, all of this definitely, takes time. And I'm certainly not looking for people to rush a decision tonight, but we do need to make a decision sooner rather than later, at least from a date perspective, or we have a plan A with a plan B, and a plan C potentially.
Do you believe that if we wait 1 week, if you gathered information from students and or parents, how we're going to go forward, and then we were able to have a meeting early next Monday, let's say, as an example, does that give you enough time to do the job the way you want to do it?
I should, I'll put something out tonight to seniors, and I'll start working on putting focus groups together this week. And so I would be able to come back next week on Monday and report back to you from students, what they're saying.
All right. So I guess at this point, I see some head shaking. Are we okay in essentially postponing this decision? It's not a motion, so we don't have to officially vote, but are we postponing the decision for a week and then agreeing to come back and reconvene a week from now when Eileen has more information from the kids and or parents?
This is Mary Ellen, Board of Ed. I just wanted to encourage Eileen to definitely reach out to the parents, because those are the people who will have all our heads if we don't do this the way that they feel is best, or just give it the best, the best chance that we can for these kids to have a special celebration. And my other question is, do we have it in the budget to hire an expensive production company?
We won't have spent any money on Welty.
Right. We do have some cost savings for, because we won't be at Welty. And so there is definitely, we still have that money set aside for graduation. So.
Okay.
I think if we're going to ask parents in a survey and get their input, I think you got to narrow what the questions are. So the question one is, if we could hold a traditional graduation, it won't be at Welty on the 21st because they closed it. We'd hold it at Sage if the restrictions were lifted. I think people need to understand the options are not unlimited because of the time frame and everything else. So I think we or the board has to come up with what are the options that we're asking people to select. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I think if you keep it open, I'm worried they're going to come back on Monday and not have an understanding of where we're going next. And I think that, if we're looking at doing something in August, then we have plenty of time, if it had to be virtual, to plan it. But if we're looking at the 21st, time is of the essence to do something of high quality.
I personally believe we have to do something on the 21st, even if it's not a virtual graduation. We need to mark the moment for the community. The community has had very few things to mark the passage of time. This is a major passage. So my feeling would be, even if we decide as a group not to go forward with a virtual and try to hold out that we'll go live in the summer, we have to have something to mark the moment, something live that we have to mark the moment in June. Brian, what would you think if perhaps you and Eileen craft some? I think we have the direction. We're talking about a virtual graduation on June 21st, and then a live celebration later in the summer. That's option number one, or some kind of a live celebration on June 21st, and then an attempt at an in-person graduation later in the summer. But if necessary, it'll have to shift to virtual. Am I summarizing that accurately?
I think if everyone on the board is okay with that, I think that's fine to offer it in that manner. And then if people want a different option, have it open, they can write in suggestions, something we're missing maybe. So I was getting some texts and emails too, so I apologize.
Yep. Does anybody have anything addition on this particular question? If we are going to be willing to postpone, Matt, you're leaning in. Do you want to do something?
I have a couple of things that I think are the obvious, but so being one of the board members that lived through the last graduation change, however many years ago that is, 4 or 5 years ago, that was a discussion about choice, where the Board of Education was talking about the option to move graduation. And we heard loud and clear that was not something that parents wanted us to do. I think that this situation is different in the fact that this is not a choice, right? There are restrictions in place now that say that we cannot hold group sessions. The venue that we have traditionally held it at has been closed, and our option has been canceled. And I certainly understand where parents want the best for their children and are disappointed that this conversation is even taking place, there's also an emotional attachment to that. I feel it myself with my own child as we go through this. And we have to be objective for the safety of the entire class and all of the extra people that will be involved with this, family, other family members, and so forth. So I completely understand why Mary Ellen is getting messages that they want to have graduation and this is what it needs to be. And we should get their input, but we also have to look at what the facts are. And that's that we're not choosing to change what we've done in the past. It's being forced upon us. And because it is a fluid situation, we can't just wait. I mean, if we wait till May 20th, when the governor may or may not begin to release things, it's too late. We can't just wait. So that's what I just, people need.
And I agree.
We need to consider
I think, Matt, the key is that it's not just simply an out and out vote. The parents aren't just going to vote, or the kids aren't going to vote. We want to get their input. We want to hear all the different ideas that are out there. But ultimately, as you pointed out, it's up to us to make the decision, guided by the health department, the State Board of Education, and the governor's office. But there's certainly no harm in soliciting opinions. But you're right. The time frame that Eileen has pointed out, a decision needs to be reached by us next week, so she can have the time, her and her team can have the time to plan whatever it is we're going to be doing. And if we wait until the middle of May for the governor's office to come back with a decision, we will have missed that window as well.
It's too late, and the quality will not be what we want it to be. We want to celebrate these kids. Absolutely. And so enough said.
That's okay. I think, go ahead, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, and I agree with Matt. I mean, it isn't our choice. It's something that we're thrown into, but we have to find the most palatable alternative that we can for everyone. So that's all.
Okay.
Well said.
All right. So I think Brian and Eileen, I think as far as I'm concerned anyway, if you can bring back information from the kids, if you want to design a survey, Brian, if you want to send it to me, or you and I can talk tomorrow, just to make sure we're on the same page in terms of what we're looking for information. And then we can reconvene early next week, next Monday, for example.
I will put together a survey, Rich. I'll run it with Eileen. I'll run it by you. You can share it with everyone on the board, and then we'll get that out. And then if you want, I'll schedule a board meeting for 6 next Monday.
Yes, please. And with the caveat that we will make a final decision next Monday, even if it's not unanimous, even if we have parents who aren't happy one way or the other, or kids that aren't happy, or staff members that aren't happy, but we absolutely will make a decision. So Eileen, you'll have your decision next Monday night, and then your team can go ahead and start planning regardless of what that decision is. Is that okay? All right.
All right. Brian, do you think by next Monday you might have more insight from the governor and commissioner regarding what the end of the year will look like?
I would hope so, being that, right now we're 3 weeks out from the May 20th date. So, but I think Welty Hall closing is a message there in itself, right? So they've told us that we're not going to be in there closing Welty Hall. So I think that's a sign in itself. I mean, if you in the news, I'm sure most of you have seen it, the Naval Academy and how they did graduation. It was the cadets were there for graduation, but the parents and any guests had to view it virtually, right? I mean, so I think it's important. I got the questions for the survey. I think there should be an open comment spot for suggestions we may have missed, and let them look at the two options that we put in front, and then offer suggestions, and then we can talk about them. So, and then I could share back, if we get the survey out tomorrow, I could share back in the update on Friday with the board, what we got back in the survey, so everyone can take a look at it.
So Brian, let's you and I communicate tomorrow. We'll talk, take a look at the survey, get it out as quickly as can. Eileen, get the information from the kids, and then we'll reconvene next Monday.
Hey, Rich, one last thing.
Sure.
Someone should probably reach out to the all-night graduation group. I have to assume that they're in the same boat, and maybe there's an opportunity to combine resources and do something really spectacular later on.
So that's where, honestly, I've been waiting for this discussion tonight just to sort of see where we might be leaning. I've been holding the all-night graduation committee kind of at bay a little bit, just to say, give me a little time. Let's see where we're heading, because we don't have a definite, like, are we in, are we out? And, we're, as of now, we're back in after May 20th, but, kind of reading the writing on the wall, we're not really sure if that's actually going to happen. So that's what I mean by, like, once I think we set, like, let's say if we did decide to go with June 21st or something, we can actually now really start pulling with all-night grad, with our senior class advisors, all of the different events that is together, and really work together to put some neat things together for our seniors as best as we can, given our circumstances. One of the things that we've talked about just from a number standpoint, like even if you're looking to pare down and have graduates, say 2 people from each family, plus the additional staff you're really at a minimum of 650 people. And that's with a skeletal staff just trying to put something on. So you want to make sure you keep that in perspective in terms of, like, alternative arrangements as well.
Thank you very much.
Rich,
Brian, I'm sorry.
One more question in here within the agenda. It talked about graduation for.
Oh, yes.
So do we want to talk about that on Monday with the other, or do we want to do it tonight? That's what I was going to ask.
Why don't we talk about it on Monday? Because this is going to be the only thing on the agenda for Monday's meeting. And then we can piggyback in terms of what future graduations will look like.
Excellent.
All right. So at this point, we're going to be needing to move to executive session. So because we obviously need a motion to go to executive session, Brian, are you the only person that's going to need to come with us?
Yes.
Or do we need Linda or Denise as well?
No, just be me.
Okay. So then I need a motion, if I could, please. And when we do this, we will not be returning to regular session. And I'm going to be shutting down this link and reopening and sending an immediate invitation out to all the board members and then to Brian, assuming that the motion passes. Okay? Just to deal with personnel issue. So do I have a motion to go to executive session?
Move to enter executive session
And to invite Brian as well.
and invite Brian as well.
Thank you, Julia.
To discuss a personnel matter.
To discuss a personnel matter. Do we have a second?
To discuss a personnel matter. Let me start over.
All right.
I move to go into executive session and invite Brian to discuss a personnel matter.
Second.
There we go. I'm just going to do this quick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I
seconded
appreciate this. Tim did, I think. Yep, Tim did. I'm going to shut this link down and immediately send you out and open up another one for the executive session that will not be on YouTube. Thank you very much, everybody.